Just 8 hours left before this countdown to history. Artemis II is set to launch tonight from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. 4 astronauts are taking off on NASA's first lunar mission in half a century, and it'll go farther than any human has traveled before. Spectators have started camping out near the Space Center to catch a glimpse of tonight's flight.
This, to me, is history, watching this. If these astronauts go up and do what they're going to do, it's going to be just awesome.
I'm hoping that it's going to shake my chest cavity, the rockets on there.
I was that little kid watching a black and white TV. When I heard about the first program coming up, I said, I'm going to be there when it launches.
All right, so we see him right there. Let's bring in CBS News space analyst Bill Harwood, a legend. Not his first rodeo at the Kennedy Space Center. No, by any means. Bill, this has been delayed several times. Our colleague Mark Strassman has said multiple times that the checklist for tonight, we're all acting as if it's a go, is as long as the rocket itself. What are they doing to ensure that this is not only safe and it runs smoothly and that they can make this launch happen?
Well, you know, the trick here is following the procedures they've laid out in advance, you know, to make sure that they're not surprised by anything. And if they are, that they have alternatives that they can bring into play quickly to press on with the countdown. I'll tell you, they're well into fueling right now. They're past the point where we had leaks earlier this year with the hydrogen tank in that first stage. So that is proceeding smoothly. There are no indications of any technical problems at this point. So it might come down to the weather, and there's always a chance something could go wrong, but they're very optimistic they've got a real shot at it this time.
Hey, Bill, it's Adriana. Tell us about your prop.
Yeah, this is the Orion capsule. The crew is going to fly in. You know, you think about 4 people in this capsule. They've got about the size of maybe a large minivan, if you think about that. So they're going to spend about 9 days in there, all cramped together. But they've been training together for 3 years. They know each other very well. They say they all know what traits they have that irritate the others and that they can handle that easily. I will say, to answer the one question that everybody gets about spacecraft in terms of how do you go to the bathroom in space, this capsule is really small, but on the floor, there's a little compartment. It's kind of like a mini telephone booth. And you kind of float down in there and you can pull some doors closed to get a little privacy. And that's one of the things they're going to test when they get up in space to make sure that works right, because if you're going to go to the moon, you've got to be able to go, right?
Okay, so if you got to go, do they release it into space or do they bring it back?
No, they keep it with them.
Well, how much detail do you want to go into? I mean, just, you know, it works, like the space station's toilet, so they don't expect any problems.
All right.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
No. So, Bill, for you, you know, what is the most critical part? What is the most critical phase that you're watching here? Is it liftoff? Is it the orbiting around Earth? Is it the orbiting around the moon? And then if this is successful, which we all hope and pray it will be, what does it mean for astronauts returning to the lunar surface?
Well, you know, as someone who watches launches, the most critical stage to me is launch. I mean, if you think about it, this rocket weighs 5.7 million pounds fueled on the launch pad. It goes 0 to 120 miles an hour straight up in about 9 seconds. Oof. I mean, that's an enormous amount of energy, and obviously you can't have any major problems. But the other thing I worry about, or think about anyway, is all that energy has to come out in the end. The energy that it takes to get you into space, you got to get rid of all that energy when you re-enter the atmosphere. And as I'm sure you've read, there have been some questions about the heat shield at the base of the Orion capsule. Had problems the first time around. They think they're good to go this time, but certainly we'll all be watching that very carefully. And then the last thing I'll mention is this is the first time a crew has flown aboard an Orion. You know, when it had the first test flight, there's no life support system in there. So all of those systems have got to work out. I mentioned the bathroom, but, you know, communications, navigation, propulsion, they're going to put all of that to the test on this flight before they even start for the moon, just to make sure the capsule is working. So those would be the 3 things I think about.
Yeah, it really sticks with me that they had heat shield problems the last time they tested this. Was that for Artemis I?
Yeah, that's right. You know, when they entered the atmosphere, it did not erode away in the way the computer model suggested. It was suffered some pretty good damage. So they think they've got that resolved.
They think they've got that resolved, but it hasn't been tested
yet.
So just sit with that for one moment. Bill Harwood, thank you so much. From one legend to another, we are now joined by CBS News radio correspondent Peter King. Peter, so good to see you. So you've, of course, reported on NASA.
Good to see you, too.
So good to see you. We've been reporting on NASA and space exploration for over 30 years. What feels different this time?
Well, this is something I actually personally dreamed about since I was a kid, growing up watching the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo flights. You know, I never had the science chops to be an astronaut, but I always thought maybe someday I'd be able to report on it, and I always hoped that I'd be able to report on a moon flight. So this is exciting. I mean, I did more than 60 space shuttle flights, and I've covered the commercial crew launches from SpaceX and Boeing. But this is much different because for the first time since I was a kid, the first time since 1972, astronauts are headed out of low Earth orbit, and they're actually going somewhere.
Hey, Peter, first of all, we all love the rockets on your shirt. I want to make sure that people at home know that that's the motif going on there. It's Matt. You and I have spent a lot of time down there waiting for launches in Florida, nibbled by mosquitoes, beaten by the sun. But the payoff, I just want to talk about the experience because we've heard a couple of guests already talk about the shaking. I want you to describe for us the visceral feeling that people get when you get that kind of thrust, you know, millions of pounds going from 0 to 120 in 9 seconds. What does it feel like when you're just a mile or 2 or even 8 miles away physically?
Well, it takes a little bit of time for the sound to get where we are, which is about 3.5 miles from the launch pad. But having seen so many of them, the thing I could tell you is that, first of all, you never forget your first launch, and especially if it's something really super powerful. For those watching Artemis, this is only the second Artemis space launch system launch, and this thing is loud. It is so loud it will not just be deafening for those who are just a couple of miles away and getting the sound just about 30 seconds or so after it ignites and leaves the pad, but you will feel it thumping in your chest. And that's one of the things that I remember about my first space shuttle launch back in 1989. You know, for us in radio, Matt, and you're a radio alum, you know, yes, the sound is the thing, and this is going to make an awful lot of noise, and it is something totally to behold. And by the way, thank you for the remarks about the shirt. It was made by a good friend of mine named Jean Wright, who has all kinds of these shirts available, and she makes them by hand. She used to sew the shuttle blankets, the thermal protection blankets that were inside the thermal protection system for the space shuttle. So she's known as the Sew Sister, S-E-W sister. She's something else.
So good. So, Peter, tell us a bit about the name Artemis and how it relates to past moon missions. I love this.
Well, this is a whole lot different than the Apollo missions because the Apollo missions were basically stay for a day or 2 or 3 and then you're gone. The Artemis missions are supposed to set up a platform for building a lunar base and a sustained presence on the moon. It's I likened it to science fiction turning into science fact. They will have to get supplies up there. They will have to get habitat modules up there. They will have to have construction equipment to put all of these things together, but they're looking for a permanent presence there at the South Pole of the moon, as opposed to, you know, a couple of days and then we're out of here. But the early landings will be like that. They won't stay for weeks at a time by any means. They'll be there for days at a time.
Well, what I love is Artemis was the sister of Apollo in Greek mythology, so the sisters doing a lot of work.
Lots of sister work.
Yeah.
Peter King, radio reporter, talking about... Go ahead, Peter.
Yes. I was going to say the sister is doing a lot of work, and the sister is just a little bit bigger than Apollo was, as Bill mentioned. But the sister is going to be put through her paces over the next few days, and everybody's got their fingers crossed that it all goes well.
So Peter King, radio reporter, talking about sound, but giving us a sense of the feels as well. Thank you so much, Peter. We're going to turn now to Rob Marciano, CBS meteorologist, on assignment, on the beach, still jazzed about all of this.
He looks like he's on the beach.
What happened to Bob?
Yeah, Bobby.
Bob got intimidated by the previous shirt. You know, I don't know how I topped that segment. You know, we talked about the Sew Sister, talked about Greek mythology. the history of Apollo and all the rest. I mean, this is such a historic day, and I'm getting more and more excited the more people I meet and the more the sun comes up and the more that clock gets a little bit closer to liftoff at shortly after 6 p.m. Eastern time. So it's a fun day for sure. And yeah, we're not quite on the beach. This is the Indian River Lagoon, which is just across the way, as you know, from the Cape Canaveral and the Kennedy Space Center. We'll see everything, and we'll feel it as well. Is it going to launch? The only fly in the ointment right now, well, there's probably many behind the scenes, but the one that we've made most public is the chances for the weather to get in the way. Luckily, with the pattern as such, we don't see any big problems with it, but we could very well see an issue with clouds. Temperature's not an issue. We know that if it gets too cold, it's not good. Too hot, everything overheats. Wind, this thing could take up to 30-plus mile-per-hour wind. That's amazing to me. That's not an issue today. Lightning shouldn't be a problem. If you see any sort of showers and thunderstorms, they should be dissipating inland by the time we get to launch time. But the clouds that linger from that may be close enough to where they nix the launch. Chances of that happening are 20%. So we'll take. I like those odds, right? We're in this Bermuda high kind of summertime flow, which is good here, but also creating the heat and humidity across much of the eastern part of the country. Severe thunderstorms across the plains. Some of those will get into the Northeast as well, and then Chicago and Detroit tomorrow. Very active weather pattern there. Hopefully not active here between 6 and 8 o'clock tonight Eastern time.
He's
Everybody
ready.
pray for the safety of those astronauts and for this thing to lift off.
Hey, Rob, are you going to be able to stay through it? And do you have your lawn chair ready?
We have those little, those little foldable chairs. Yep, and we've caught a little bit of shade. Not everybody has shade here. I mean, I met a family that got in at 1 o'clock last night from Colorado Springs with 2 young girls in probably middle school, and they're not in spring break. They're going back tomorrow. So because they got to get back to school and they got track meets and the whole thing. I mean, that's people have come from all corners of the country to witness this historic event. So
but
let's
they
hope
will
it goes
not
off
soon forget
on time and safely as scheduled.
Yeah, and they will not soon forget it, Rob.
Educational experience.
Yeah.
Parents of the Year. Rob Marciano, thank you so much.
Right?
Yeah. Stay with CBS News for continuing coverage of the Artemis II mission around the moon throughout the day and in the lead up to the launch. We will have special coverage beginning at 4 p.m. Eastern on CBS News 24/7, followed by a special report at 6 p.m.